Hey everybody, this is Big Bear, Tony Sandoval. I'm just coming to you tonight with a quick little thing. I had some really good questions on Facebook tonight. I wanted to kind of address a little bit because thanks to the Flow Hive, um, if nothing else, it's gotten people to really take an interest in what happens in beekeeping, even from a lot of non-beekeeping people. So I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of answer that. Um, First of all, the flow hive is not a different kind of hive, okay? It's a way of collecting honey. It's a fancy novelty honey collection system. As a hive itself, it's still part of what's called the Langstroth hive system. Um Lorenzo Langstroth invented it 150 years ago, and people have been pretty much using that as the de facto conventional hive and management system ever since. So that doesn't change anything with the so-called flow hive. The flow hive just changes how people collect honey from the hive. And basically, you still have to open the hive. You still have to open the boxes to inspect where the brood are, the eggs and the larvae. You're still opening the hive. You're not opening the hive to collect honey supers, collect boxes off of there, but that's not where it matters. When you're collecting honey supers, the bad part, so to speak, that they're worried about when it comes to opening the boxes up and stressing the bees is when you open up what's called the brood section. This is where the queen is laying the eggs, the young larva and all that. They need to maintain a certain temperature, a certain nest environment. So when you open up the brood section too often, it produces a lot of stress on the colony and the bees. Opening up the honey supers, not nearly as stressful in comparison. I mean, it still, yes, it is stressful on the bees because you're disturbing the nest, but it's not the same damaging effect as opening the brood section, which is where the heat in the nest environment, where all the pheromones and communication and taking care of the nest is really happens and takes place. So I just wanted to kind of address that. We're out here in the backyard doing our thing. Another thing is how many types of hives. So if the flow hive isn't even really a different kind of hive, just a different way of collecting honey, the next question was, well, then how many kinds of hives are there? And the answer to that is there's dozens of types of hives. They basically flow off of two or three kinds. You either have the type of hives that have frames, you have the type of hives that don't have frames. They have top bars or something like that. Once you break it down from framed and top bar or non-framed, you get dozens of breakdowns of each of those, and then you have literally hundreds of variations of those. So I mean, Abbé Imaury in France back in early 1900s, when he wrote his book, he claimed to have tested over 300 different hives before he ended up settling on his design. So there's all kinds of different hives. There's different hive management styles in terms of what your production goals are. Do you have production goals? Are you doing it for pollination? Are you doing it for honey or wax production? Are you doing it for a combination of those things? Are you doing it mostly for conservation or breeding? There's different things, different techniques and tricks and whatnot you use to manage each way of doing those things. So it gets to be very diverse based on what you're trying to accomplish. And that's okay. Another question, if it's a honey super system, collection of honey system, does it affect how honey tastes? And no. Honey is affected primarily by the source of nectar, where the bees get the nectar, what type of nectar, where the flower, what type of flower it is. That is the number one determination of the flavor of the honey. After that, blending. A lot of times people will blend different kinds of honeys together. They will blend, they'll blend like different flavorings into honey. So, for example, somebody says, hey, I want vanilla flavored honey. Okay. You're probably going to get a flavor. I want root beer flavored honey. There's actually a root beer flavored honey out there that's offered because they blend in a root beer flavoring with the honey. And it's typically a wildflower or clover honey as the base that they use, and then they add the extra flavoring. But in terms of the hive style or the method, the box style of how they collect the honey, no, that really doesn't have any real effect on the flavor. And back to the flow hive a little bit, and the way they collect honey is I find what they do a little bit disingenuous, because they sit there and they talk about, how it's a new hive way of taking care of hives and dealing with hives and, getting the honey from them and managing hive systems that causes or reduces stress on the bees. Well, that's a kind of a dubious comment, because yes and no, it reduces stress, but like a lot of things, stress you actually have their stress that's, I won't call it good stress, but it's definitely not the same as, the really bad stress, like there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, or, things like that. Some stress actually strengthens a colony, because when they face that, they're forced to adapt. And it generally, even the negative effects of it isn't that bad. And when you're talking about removing honey supers producing stress on a colony, it's the not so bad kind of stress. So when they talk about, they're really making some kind of huge impact on reducing stress of a colony, no, not really. Not that big. It's really not. It's convenient for the beekeeper and purely for the beekeeper. It's a neat thing. It's a novelty. It's way, way too expensive to use as a regular production system. So don't think you're going to get, a lot of these and put them on 1,000 hives. It ain't going to happen. Just not happening. But, one or two, just for the novelty of having it, you're a hobbyist beekeeper, you say you've got a honey shop that you sell honey at. It'd be neat to have one to show off to people, or make videos or whatever, put them on YouTube. It's a neat thing to have. I'm not going to say negative about that way. It's a neat thing. I'd take one. I'd work one just for the novelty of it. But to say that I would integrate it as a part of a regular hive system or beekeeping management, no, it's just not practical. And there's a lot of things to it. For our non-beekeeping viewers, let's just go out and say that it's not even that good of a way to check how, if the honey's ready, because they give you windows to look in on it, but they don't give you enough. You still have to pull each individual frame out to check if the whole thing is capped. Otherwise, you could get honey that's not ripe enough yet and mix it with the ripened honey that you can see through the little windows they give you. But if you're mixing the not ripe honey with the ripe honey, it's going to end up diluting it, and you're going to end up with bad honey that could ferment. So even that's not foolproof. I wouldn't trust it unless I opened up every single frame of that to check and make sure it was all ripened properly. So, again, big time novelty issue. But it's gotten a lot of interest in beekeeping. The Flow Hive has. More people are taking a look at it because they think it makes beekeeping easier, which ironically, going back to Warre was the whole reason he designed his hive system, the Warre hive system, or what he called the people's hive, because he was trying to make beekeeping easier for people in France so that they could take honey and produce, harvest honey without getting stung as much or having to interact so much with the bees. You know, they would make it more easy to work with, and at the same time being respectful and being conservation minded with the bees, you know. So these guys seem to have the same kind of thinking intention wise, although practically carrying that out I don't think is going to be nearly as effective. But you know, every system has its pros and cons, so everybody's got to choose, you know, where they want to go with that. I want to thank Raymond for asking some really good questions on Facebook. And hopefully it'll, you know, help some other folks, you know, get to know a little bit more about what goes on in beekeeping and what beekeepers have to think about when they get equipment and when they do get these kind of things, you know, going started. What are they planning and what kind of equipment they're going to use, what goes all into that. So y'all have a good one, and I'll catch you the next time, folks. Thank you. Enjoy your bees.